At his funeral, the flowers were shaped like the World Cup. His family had known for decades. His friends had known for decades. The only people who didn't know, who never knew, were Scotland Yard. This is the story of the greatest theft in football history and the near-perfect crime that almost erased the 1966 World Cup before it ever began. Westminster Central Hall, London, March 1966. England is 4 months away from hosting the World Cup for the first time in her history. 54 million people, one national obsession, and one trophy, small enough to fit under a man's jacket, yet carrying the weight of the entire sporting world. The Jules Rimet Trophy. 35 centimeters of gold-plated silver and lapis lazuli, sculpted in 1929 in the image of Nike, the Greek goddess of victory. This thing had survived the Blitz. It had been hidden from the Nazis in a shoebox under a bed in Rome. It had passed through the hands of champions, Uruguay, Italy, Brazil. It was not just a prize, it was a relic. And now it was sitting in a glass case at a stamp exhibition. The Football Association had agreed to loan the trophy to Stanley Gibbons' Stampex show, Britain's premier philatelic event. The conditions were ironclad. A reputable security firm, a locked case, round-the-clock guards, insured for £30,000, 6 times its actual assessed value, which, if you needed any proof that no one had really thought this through, was listed officially at £3,000. 4 uniformed officers, 2 plainclothes, 1 stationed permanently at the case when the hall was open. On Sundays, however, the Central Hall hosted Methodist services. The guards began their noon circuit on Sunday, March 20th. By 12:10 p.m., one of them, John McLaren's, an aspiring actor doing security work to pay the bills, went to check the display. He looked at the plinth. He started laughing. A nervous chuckle, he would later say. Not because it was funny, because the trophy was simply gone. There it was, McLaren's recalled. Nothing, just the plinth. Quite a shocker. The rear doors had been forced, the screws and bolts pried out from the inside, the padlock cut from the display case. Whoever did this had been inside the building before it closed. They had hidden, they had waited, and they had walked out with the World Cup under their coat, in broad daylight, during a church service. Within 10 minutes, McLaren said, there were hundreds of police swarming the hall, running, shouting. The trail was already cold. 24 hours later, a ransom note arrived at Stamford Bridge, the home of Chelsea Football Club, chaired by the FA's own Joe Mears. The package contained the lining from the top of the trophy, proof that the thieves had the real thing. The demand? £15,000 in small notes. If the FA contacted police, if they told the press, the trophy would be melted down. Mears did the only sensible thing and immediately called the police. What followed was a sting operation that would have embarrassed a junior detective. A suitcase was packed with blank pieces of banknote-sized paper. An undercover officer, codenamed McPhee, was sent to Battersea Park to meet a man calling himself Jackson. The handover took place. But Jackson, glancing into the rearview mirror of the moving car, spotted a surveillance van tailing them. He threw himself out of the moving vehicle. A foot chase, a garden, an arrest. Jackson turned out to be Edward Betchley, petty thief, used car dealer, a man with a record stretching back years. He swore he hadn't stolen the cup, said he'd been hired to act as a go-between by someone he called only the Pole. Betchley was charged, tried, convicted of demanding money with menaces, and sentenced to 2 years. He died in 1969, of emphysema, having never given up the name. Scotland Yard had their man, except he wasn't the man. For 7 days, England held its breath. The FA, quietly, desperately, commissioned a replica, because the honest truth was, nobody knew if they'd ever see the real trophy again. The World Cup was coming in July. 60,000 fans would fill Wembley. The Queen was scheduled to present the trophy, and the trophy was God knows where in South London. Then, on March 27, 1966, a Thames lighterman named David Corbett took his dog for a walk. Pickles was a black and white collie mix, nothing special. But on that evening, on Beulah Hill in Upper Norwood, Pickles stopped at a hedge and started digging. Corbett reached down and pulled up a parcel wrapped in old newspaper, tied with string. Inside was the World Cup. The newspapers went absolutely mad. Pickles received fan mail. Pickles appeared on television. Pickles got a year's supply of dog food and a silver medal from the Canine Defense League. Corbett received £6,000, several years' wages for the average working man. They attended the World Cup final as guests. The trophy was real. The FA quietly shelved the replica. England went on to win the tournament. Bobby Moore lifted the Jules Rimet before the Queen at Wembley on July 30th, 1966, a moment enshrined in the nation's memory forever. And the case was closed. Officially. 52 years later, a crime editor at the Daily Mirror named Tom Pettifor was talking to an underworld source. A throwaway comment, a name, a thread he couldn't stop pulling. Pettifor went into the police files from 1966. He noticed something that had been overlooked for half a century. Betchley had been arrested very close to the Walworth area of South London. That lined up with the tip. He dug further. He pulled at records, arrest sheets, old descriptions from witnesses at the Central Hall who'd seen a man leaving shortly after the trophy disappeared. Eventually, the trail led him to a man named Sidney Q. His full name, Sidney Cougalaire, a product of London's post-war underworld, raised poor, jailed for most of his adult life, and, here's the part that sends a chill down the spine, he had not gone to Westminster Central Hall to steal the World Cup. He had gone to steal the stamps. The penny black stamps in that basement were worth millions, but the security on them was tight, too tight. So Cougalaire walked upstairs, saw the trophy, saw the guards sitting in an annex drinking tea, and he simply took it, slipped it under his jacket, and walked out into the March morning. No plan, no buyer, no exit strategy. According to his nephew Gary, Cougalaire stepped outside, lifted his jacket, and said to his brother, "Here you are, Reg. Look at this." He had stolen the World Cup the way you'd steal a pen off a desk. Cougalaire died in 2005, age 79, never charged, never officially identified. His family knew. His friends knew. At his funeral, the flower arrangements were shaped like the Jules Rimet trophy. He used to say, and there's something both funny and sickening about this, that he was the first Englishman to lift the World Cup in 1966, and that he did it before Bobby Moore. The Jules Rimet trophy itself never made it to old age. Brazil won it for a third time in 1970 and earned the right to keep it forever. In 1983, it was stolen from the Brazilian Football Confederation's headquarters in Rio de Janeiro. It was never recovered. It is almost certainly melted down, gone. The most celebrated sporting object of the 20th century survived the Nazi occupation of Rome, survived the London underworld, survived a week stuffed under a hedge in South London, and it ended in a furnace. There's something about this story that stays with you. Not the bungled ransom, not Pickles in the hedge, not even the fact that they never really caught the right man. It's this. The whole machine, the FA, Scotland Yard, the British press, worked furiously to project an image of competence, of control, of national pride. A replica was made in secret, the real story was buried, and the man who actually did it spent 40 years in plain sight, telling the story at dinner parties, while his family sent him off with World Cup wreaths. The trophy taught us something about power, about the stories that institutions need to tell, and the ones they choose to forget. The trophy wasn't really stolen from a case in Westminster. It was lost because no one was paying attention, because the guards wanted their tea, because the system assumed the thing would keep itself safe. They always do. If this story stuck with you, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who thinks they know this case, because they don't. Not all of it.